Hello and welcome. I'm Herbert Ricardo. I'm here with Alicia Vassar, and we're going to talk about social media. Today, we'll talk a little bit about the good, the bad, the ugly. And hopefully, you'll all enjoy a little bit of what we're going to share with each other. So, my first question is I'm going to go ahead and pose that to you, Alicia, and that is what are the positive sides to social media?
So one of the things that I think that's really great about social media is how it facilitates relationships and connects people together. So for me, keeping connected in a fast-paced world, I mean, all of us have a super fast-paced world between balancing work, jobs, friendships. Social media can be really good at staying in touch with all of these people. I find it good for staying in touch with my family, staying in touch with friends. My platform that I usually use is usually Instagram, and it's been really useful in sharing important moments in my life and like everyday highlights with people in my network. It also gives a fun, simple way for me to kind of engage with people, like sending little funny clips and things. And that's something I can do in little pockets of downtime. And it keeps me connected to the people that I love.
You just talked a little bit about little pockets of downtime and, the statistics about the amount of time people spend on social media. It's incredible. It's about 60% of the world, okay, world active individuals who have access to social media, right? About 4.5 billion people. And the average time is about 2 hours a day. And, I'm a professor, I teach, and I've actually asked some of my students how much time they've spent, and it'll vary anywhere from generally somewhere around 2 hours a day to even up to about 7 or 8 hours a day. And
I can
so
believe that.
now you're talking about pockets. I know that you've got a couple of jobs. You work two jobs, and you're active with so many other areas. So how do you control? I'm going to use that word. How much social media you're active on?
So I do look at one of the things that I use a lot is on Sundays, I receive a digital well-being report on my phone and it tells me the hours. And I've actually seen with having more jobs and things to do, how that screen time has kind of gone down. But mine usually sat around like 4 or 5 hours. Now it's down to about like 3.5 hours. But I think that tool right there is kind of already amazing because it gives me a way of realizing how much, because it's so easy to get stuck into kind of a scrolling kind of thing, especially if I do have free time. You can get really stuck in just like going through social media apps and things like that. So it kind of gives me an idea of how much time I'm spending on them, um, which I found really helpful. It
Yeah.
also kind of gives me an insight into how it's affecting my mental health because sometimes I'll look at it and I'll just be like, oh wow, I had a lot of screen time this week. I wonder if that's why I'm feeling so anxious.
Wow, wow. So you actively you do a mental check on
Yeah.
on how you're feeling and possibly connect it to how much time that you spent on social media. So not only obviously are you, interacting with your family, but you're also and work, but you're also recognizing that there's another component, which is that screen time or screen media time that you're spending. It's interesting, I'll have pockets in the day where whether I'm grading or I'm in meetings, and then I'll be in between. I'll be in between a meeting. I don't tend to do this during a meeting, but I'll be in between, and I'll go onto social media feed, and I will look at the cats running around, the dogs licking the cats or whatever, that kind of stuff, or just something just about 3 or 4 minutes of of I'm going to call it nonsense. It's not. I mean, it's actually
It's
entertaining.
lighthearted fun a
It
lot of
is.
the
It
time.
is. It is, and that's just enough. It's almost like drinking some coffee,
Yeah, it's a
and
shot of dopamine.
it is. That's exactly it. So I think this is good. I think this is good for us to do this if we find that it gives us that element of energy for that particular time.
I like
What
the
else is that
aspect of
positive?
it that it goes back to connecting with people because when you have those little pockets of time, I can text my friend, I can text, I can catch up with someone in that little pocket of time, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't have access to a social media app.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, you use that one too. I think I'll do that too. I'll do some scrolling. I'll see a picture. I'll clip the picture. I'll forward it on to a couple of friends, and that's also my connection with my friends. And I know that hopefully they'll like that little picture or whatever that I'm sending, whatever it happens to be. I like cars or whatever, and so maybe there'll be a picture of a particular car or something, and I'll send it to my friend Dan, and he'll make a comment about it and send it back again. And generally in that space, it's very short though. We don't go
Mhm.
on and on and on. There's other stuff that we might, but again, I think that this is of value. I think that whereas many years ago we would think about something and share it with a friend, now what we can do is because that person is not next to us, we can still share something, an idea and a thought with a friend
Mhm.
that's at a distance, right?
And that's great. It is great, but I do think there's something important about it's a different type of connection than the genuine. I don't want to say genuine because it already puts a bad tone on, but it's a different form of connection than that face-to-face interfacing.
Sure, sure. There's no doubt. And I think we'll talk even a little bit more about the difference between that interaction that we have with individuals electronically, and of course the one that we have face to face and emotionally in a physical space. So, what other areas of social media do you find that are helpful to you, engaging for you? Maybe that helps you either in your personal life, maybe helps you in your professional life, just maybe, or maybe even for self-development. Where does social media fit in that?
So I found it really good for kind of building relationships and connecting with like-minded individuals. So for me, during my high school to middle school time, I was homeschooled. So a lot of the times I was at home. I didn't have access to like a school system of friends and things like that. So social media sites kind of gave me a way to connect to people outside of this homeschooled environment. And one of the greatest things that I ended up finding is when I got into Dungeons and Dragons, I couldn't find anyone to play with. It's a game that you have to have about one other person with you, but the more people that you can play with, it is fun, and there's a lot of different ways that you can play Dungeons and Dragons. But I was able to find a social media site, Meetup, where there was a group looking for people to hang out. And I actually found a group and all of these other people. There's one person who had been doing this for years, like played the original game. And I have basically found a community of people who played this game. And I still to this day go on Sundays to play.
Oh, great. That's terrific. I don't tend to connect with communities, I must admit. I tend to do that in my professional environment.
Mhm.
But social media, YouTube, which is now I think it's the number one global social media platform where we get a lot of information. And again, we can use that for pure entertainment, but also in the work environment. I'm always looking at documentaries. I'll look at TED Talks, and this will also support information that I'll share in the classroom. So now I can spend a fair amount of time. If I'm watching an hour long or an hour and a half long documentary. Now, of course, I justify it too. I justify it that I'm learning professional development, but also it's something that I'm going to use probably in the classroom too. So it's engagement for my students. But I do kind of going back to where kind of where we started a little bit. I too have to watch that. I have to watch how much time I'm spending on social media because what we tend to do is we tend to only think that social media is the texting part, the Instagram, the Facebook, the X. but it's not. It's more than that, isn't it?
A lot.
It's all of what we do on social media, and that encompassing suddenly becomes a lot of time, and it pulls us away from the our personal relationships, doesn't it?
But I think that educational aspect that you were talking about, especially for YouTube, again, being homeschooled, that was something that was important for me to have access to because the educational content on there was endless. One of my favorite channels, Crash Course, it was started by two brothers, one who had an interest in history and another one who seems to have like a focus on science. And they would go and just do crash courses on American history, world history. That's what they started with. Now they go out, they branch into English, they go into civics, all kinds of different things. And they're basically mini lessons. They've evolved so much that they actually have lesson plans for teachers. So they're set up to genuinely help education, educate people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, and that's wonderful, and we want, more individuals spending time in, learning, obviously. I think that's great. And whatever area that you're in, whether you're in school, whether you're in college, whether you're, outside, you're a working adult, but if you're a teenager or something, we have the environment now that we can learn about just about anything. So I think that that's really terrific. And of course, we have to watch where some of this
Mhm.
content is coming from too, right? We recognize that, and of course, maybe again, we'll even maybe even do one day a segment on how to recognize legit and well reviewed studied information versus general. But I think for the most part, I think we understand where that is. Well, good. And so I think that's really neat. Maybe talk a little bit about community support and working in communities. I mean, one of the things that social media is able to do is it's able to give voice to the voiceless, to individuals maybe who have been shy about interacting with individuals on a personal level. When you're communicating on a platform such as this, it might be easier.
Definitely, this is a personal one for me. I've found community for people who are late diagnosed with autism. For me, I found out I was autistic in 2020. So that was a really different experience, especially because I'm a woman and I'm Black. So it's a very different and unique experience. But because of social media and things like I used Reddit, I was able to find other people with the same life circumstances with the same disability. And it not only allowed me to connect with other people to see, like, oh, I'm not the only person who experiences life like this, but there's also the support aspect. A lot of times we share advice for each other. One of my favorite ones is we give recommendations of headphone advice because everyone wants to know the best, like, over-the-ear headphones that are good for noise canceling. But also there's the other specific aspects of like sensory wise. Are they comfortable headphones? Are they affordable? Because a lot of us have financial issues. So it's really useful for communities that aren't seen, they're not visible. Because for me, I wasn't even aware this community existed until 5 years ago. And I imagine for a lot of people, it's similar.
Yeah, yeah. That's, again, it's so powerful to recognize that one can try to find environments that support ideas and thoughts that they have. Certainly we know that people with certain health issues, can go on social media, and there are platforms where people talk about that. I know parenting,
Yes.
parents will go on to a number of different, social media platforms and, talk about how they're raising their kids. And again, it's one of these environments where you have to be careful, you have to be very thoughtful about how you get into them, what are you trying to get from that particular environment, and what are you going to give to that environment too? Because that's one of the great things about social media is that it works both ways. It works in a way that you're able to share, and you've got to be cognizant on how you're sharing because people will listen. And the other thing too is it's not one or two people. Suddenly, you might be in an environment where there are thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even millions of people who will listen to what you have to say. So being aware of that is quite important, and sharing some characteristics about yourself.
Definitely. I think that goes really well into the dark side aspects of social media because, yes, to find support in these groups is really great, but who's to say that group is going to actually support and be good for your mental health? Because I think of a lot of groups like incel culture where there are groups of young men who are basically put in a toxic environment where they're supporting the worst things they believe about themselves. And it just creates this depressive environment that really affects mentally men. So it definitely has a really large side where it could be used in a way that harms people.
Yeah, yeah. And, again, one of the things that we're looking at in this more modern way um, of, of thinking is, is about how we feel about certain things. And the top one, just because of where we are today, could be, the political environment, and so, what we'll tend to do is we'll tend to find either an environment that aligns with our belief system, or we'll find an environment that is completely opposite. And if we find the environment that is aligned with our belief system, then what we'll do is we'll support and we'll give accolades to individuals in that environment. But then on the flip side to that, what we'll do is we'll try to instigate, gaslight the other side, and even posing as someone who's part of that community, even though we may not be. And so that is a major characteristic of social media, and a major part of where a lot of individuals get their energy from too.
I think there's a big part of like echo chambers, especially when you talk about how the internet can be siphoned into like specific areas. It's very easy to find what you like and stay where you like your stuff. So you can sit in an echo chamber, and if they're telling you, or if you're somewhere where someone is promoting things that just aren't healthy for you, or they're feeding into delusions, or there's a lot of ways that it can go bad for someone where you're sitting and you're not seeing an outside perspective to be able to ground yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we find it hard. Again, back almost to the beginning, you were talking about how you'll judge your mood based on, how much social media you may have had. I think sometimes we don't do that, right? Now, I
Mhm.
have heard, which is good. I've heard some people say, I've got to get off of social media. It's just too toxic for me. And I think the reason it's too toxic for them is because they keep going to the toxic environments, right? You can reverse that as well. Again, not saying that you should continue to be on social media. If you're finding that that environment is currently too toxic, then, turn it off, click, and don't be a part of that. There's no doubt that I'm a strong believer of that. And I'm a strong believer too of monitoring how much social media that you're on. Often people will say to me, "Oh, I don't see you on social media." Well, I might be on it. I'm just not responding. And
Mhm.
and I do that purposefully, not because I don't want to give people accolades for what they're doing and all that kind of stuff, but in a way, I really sometimes I don't want to be seen on there. I enjoy seeing what my friends are doing. I enjoy seeing the different platforms. but I also try to judge how much effort that I'm putting into each one of those. And I find sometimes that just being an observer is better than being an active participant. And I
Yes.
and I think those are two different characteristics that influence how we see that environment. So, if you could just imagine if you're watching television and suddenly you can be in it, that's a complete different environment than if you're just sitting back and you're just watching something happen, right?
So I think it takes on there's two parts. I like the fact that you're talking about these things can be addictive. I think it's built into a lot of them. Um, a lot of social media platforms, they have algorithms. I think of YouTube, I think of TikTok, even the Instagram Reels, all of those short little videos, those are algorithm based. So they're meant to keep you going. If there's other aspects too, there's rage bait where it's just, social media sites know that they get engagement when people are angry. It's the way that you get people to engage. It gets people instead of lurking and watching, they actively engage. And then there's even more things that I think would promote it. You get people supporting you that might promote you to, do that. You get people who are saying something that you're going to want to argue back to because for some people it's just this is so it blows your mind and you start trying to argue back and then you're engaging and you're stuck on this app for who knows how long. So it feels like you're set up in a lot of ways to get addicted to these things.
Yeah, and so I think now again, I think there's room for continuous conversation about a particular topic. Again, that is thoughtful. You're understanding what it's about. You're being very selective on how you're interacting. And then there's that emotional other side where you're just reacting.
And
And
the internet promotes that. That is definitely, that's how the internet runs, I feel like.
that's what it wants, right?
Mhm.
It's almost like when we go shopping, stores want us to be impulsively buying. We really need to be when we go to buy something, we should be more thoughtful. Okay, what is it I want to buy? How much do I want to spend so I don't overspend and I don't buy something that I don't want? Well, the same thing happens in the social media environment too, right? If you let your emotions and you react and you don't give it thought, then anything can happen, and you start to lose control. And again, it can affect you in a quite negative way. Whereas if you're being thoughtful and you understand and you're recognizing what you're trying to put through, and it's not giving you the feedback that you want, or the feedback that you're getting is not exactly where you want to be. Remember, you can turn it off. You can stop.
Mhm.
You can talk to somebody and say, I gotta go. It's lunchtime. I gotta go. And it's okay. But we just feel compelled, don't we, that we have to keep going, keep going, keep going. And I think that's what creates a lot of the anxiety and the stress that we have associated with social media.
I do. And I think it goes into how social media can be a hostile environment, like for cyberbullying and like harassing of people, because a lot of times it is just you can step back, you can turn it off, but that's not always the case when you're talking about when you're receiving from cyber harassment and how it can bleed into your real life. Because I had heard stories of like this one woman who, for a legal technicality, she ended up having to sue her nephew, who was like a 9-year-old. And it was just insurance purposes. It wasn't like she was genuinely suing her 9-year-old nephew for jumping in her arms and breaking her arm. It was something for medical insurance, and it was really complicated. However, when that got out into the internet, people freaked out. All they heard was aunt sues her 9-year-old nephew for breaking her arm, hugging her. And there is no thoughtfulness. It's the internet. And that woman instantly became the person of the day that everyone disliked. And because the internet is this permanent kind of marker, she would for years after continue to receive this harassment. She would receive it trying to get jobs. She would receive it in her real life um, because it followed her.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too that when you go online and you're putting information out there, it stays for a long time. It can be misconstrued, and it can affect you it seems unfortunate that more so in a negative way than a positive way. Of course, it can influence you in a positive way or the environment. Just kind of going back to the cyberbullying, I had 25 students in a class. And I asked the students, it was in my ethics class, how many of the students were aware or knew of someone, they didn't have to say whether it was them or somebody that they knew who'd been cyberbullied, and all but one put their hand up. And again, it's, we tend to think of some of these things that, oh, well, there aren't that many people being influenced or affected by it, but in reality, there is. Um, and so, kind of as we go along with this too, what are some of the things that we can do to mitigate and control the amount of social media that we're taking in order to make it a healthier environment for us?
So I think using some of those tools, like I said, for me, I have a digital well-being report that weekly it comes in whether I set it up or not, it's automatically doing it. And it'll tell me how many hours I'm using, what specific apps I'm using. So it kind of gives me that data, that information I need to know. Okay, how is you got to know how your social media use is in the first place to kind of manage it. So I think that's one of the basic steps. And a lot of phones, I mean, this automatically came with mine. Mine's a Samsung. I imagine uh, other smartphones have features like it.
Sure, no, absolutely. Uh, uh, I'm thinking about there's looking at your phone, which is of course a major place where we're interacting with social media, and so there's the app there. But even if you're not engaging in that particular app, how much time? I'm wondering what kind of advice do you think we can give to individuals about how to monitor their time? What is the right amount of time? How could one determine that?
Ooh, that one I think goes a lot for how you're feeling because for me, like I said, I use that digital well-being and I use it in junction with how I'm feeling that week, that mindfulness that I'm able to say, okay, if I see my number going up, was it just a week that I was resting? Or, hey, is my energy level so low that I'm seeking out more of these easy dopamine uh, interactions through my phone? Um, Also, I think just in general, having a set time at all is really good because a lot of people don't, I would imagine, don't manage their screen time because it's something we use for everything. It's something you use for your work. I use my phone as my wallet at this point. A lot of times when I go to events, tickets are right there in my phone. Um, it's constantly with me. So I think setting aside times where I know daily I'm not going to interact with my phone has been really great. So like I'll set even more like a do not disturb, a sleep setting, and it'll allow me to put my phone on do not disturb at a certain time. And after that, I'm not bothered by my phone. It goes down into grayscale, so I don't get notifications. It's not, a bright, shiny thing for me to go play with. So that also kind of gives me a built-in screen detox.
Yeah, yeah. I am as you know, I focus on productivity a lot. I talk about personal productivity. I talk about the workplace productivity, and a couple of things that I've tried to work on with myself, and also I share with others, and especially when we're talking about productivity, is recognize first of all, make a note how much time you're spending on the social media. Try to figure out how much time you want to allocate on that day. So do you want to spend 3 hours or 2 hours, and then determine what is that time for work? Is that time for interacting with friends and family, whatever it happens to be? And then the other thing too, which again is what I do, is I try to balance that out with human time. So I try to measure how much time have I spent on social media with sending information to friends, communicating with friends via social media versus on a phone call, listening to them, speaking to them, and then face to face, spending time with them in that way. And, of course, I'm from the generation where growing up, we never had social media. We didn't have mobile phones. It was all, just interacting. And, I miss that. And I think we all do. Talking to my students who did grow up with technology, that level of technology, I think they will even talk about the fact that they like the human connection just as much. So watching that, and then of course, again, which one is being designed more for your level of productivity. So I talk about professional development. I talk about your emotional state, just like what you're talking about. Has the amount of time that you spend on social media, has it helped you with your emotional well-being, or has it not? And the same thing in the workplace. Can you connect social media? And again, that might be LinkedIn, where you're connecting with other professionals. Again, sure, maybe that can start the interaction, but then get on the phone, try to figure out a time that we can meet, so that human connection happens. And I think that can, I think, create a sense of balance
Yes. Mhm.
within ourselves.
I think that's the key is a balance because there is an aspect where you can't get away from social media use, phone use. But then there's also the aspect of it's not fulfilling on its own. I think we saw a trial run with that with the pandemic. We had a bunch of ways for us to try to interact with each other, not face to face, but it still didn't stop people from feeling a sense of loneliness, even having that access to screens.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's exactly it. And I think the COVID and the pandemic certainly accelerated the fact that we find that we're able to spend time on screen time, but unfortunately, I think we're using it more than we probably need to,
Mhm.
or that might be useful for us all. This has been great. Alicia, do you have any last parting words about social media and its uses and what individuals should do?
I think just reiterating that balance because there is an inevitable aspect that we're going to be using these tools, but I think there's still ways that we can make them fulfilling for ourselves by using them consciously, mindfully.
Great, absolutely. And again, I think we've covered it, and I thoroughly appreciate this time that we've had together and talking about this. I know in the past we've talked about coming together and sharing this kind of information, and hopefully others can benefit from it. So thanks again. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We look forward to next week as we cover another cool and fun topic. This podcast was produced by Three Lions Production and sponsored by Con Consulting and Training. Until next time, keep it between the lines.